Ambassador, first of all, thank you for your time and presence in 360 degrees. What is the purpose of your visit to the region, and do you bring a new proposal on the name issue?
Well, you know, for about 2 years now, I haven't gone to the region in an official capacity, which has been a bit disappointment to me. And now there's a new government in Skopje with some new ideas on the issue. And in the past couple years, for various reasons, as we know, the time wasn't really right for intensive, serious negotiations on the issue of the name. But now, hopefully, attention is turning back to that issue, which I think is very important. And so I'm going to meet the parties and test the receptiveness to moving forward in a serious way. I'm not bringing a new proposal this time.
The new government in Skopje represents itself as the new face of Macedonia, which, among other things, includes new behavior towards neighboring countries. Do you recognize this new approach by Skopje?
Yeah. Well, I've been reading the press reports and reading the statements of the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and other leaders of the new government. And there's some hopeful aspects to what they're saying. I think it's always been very important for the country to get along with its neighbors. The neighborhood is a difficult area, and the country is a new country. As you know, it's in the United Nations under a temporary name, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which is a name I have to use as a UN representative. But this was always meant to be temporary, and the interim agreement is now many, many years old, 1995. So it's time to solve some problems. And I'm heartened by the idea that people are taking a fresh look at the issues with neighboring countries.
How do you see the fact that the first bilateral meeting of the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nikola Dimitrov, whom you know very well, was to Athens?
Yeah, I think this is an important sign. You know, you never lose touch with your neighbors, right? You can have good relations with people halfway around the world. You can go to China, you can go to the United States, you can go to Moscow, but you should always pay most attention to your next door neighbors. In the United States, we always have to pay attention to Mexico and Canada, you know. So I think it was a good sign. Greece is maybe the most important neighbor in terms of economic relations. The port of Thessaloniki, the city of Thessaloniki, is an important regional center. People from your country travel down to Greece all the time. Greeks come up to your country for very often for business, for pleasure, for skiing, for recreation. And even in the worst time, and you know, I go back to those difficult times in the 90s, even then, the human relationship, the people-to-people relationship between the people of both countries was always a positive one. And I think that solidifying the relationship with Greece and the sign that Dimitrov went there first was a good gesture. And I think the statements of Foreign Minister Kotzias of Greece were positive also, and that he's handled this relationship in a very constructive way. So I'm hopeful that this will bring good developments in the future.
Was the crisis in Macedonia, which was partially produced by the impediment in the Euro-Atlantic integration, sign that there is a need, a big need of removing the deadlock?
You know, I have a lot of admiration for your country. I go back, I remember very well the breakup of Yugoslavia. When I was in the State Department, I dealt with Tito even, and dealt with Yugoslavia. And so I know the history of the emergence of these nation states, including the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. We need to change that name and get Yugoslav out of the name, which is a historical anomaly. But to get complete legitimacy in the region, and we need to solve this name issue. And I think that the issues within the country would be helped in their solution by moving rapidly on a European Union track and a NATO track. Because I think that a feeling in the country by all the people in there, whatever ethnic background, that the country is here to stay as a totally European country, integrated into Europe, is very important. And a lot of the difficulties, political issues, legal issues, corruption issues, inter-ethnic issues, these will be much more easily solved if the countries in the European, clearly in the European world, and that can only happen if we solve the name issue.
What do you think about Prime Minister Zaev's statement saying that the new government will try to get NATO membership invitation under the provisional name, a scenario in which the period until the NATO accession protocols are ratified will be used to solve the problem?
Well, you know, I read his statement, but also some of the statements from Athens about this issue. So I would say that there are many formulas that we can think about that might help solve the issue, and confidence-building measures are part of that. So I think it was constructive that the Prime Minister is thinking seriously about these issues and methods of solving them. And when I get to Skopje and have a chance to talk to him and other leaders in the country, Foreign Minister Dimitrov, we can pursue some of these ideas.
What is the mandate, your mandate on this issue, and what are the differences that need to be overcome?
Yeah. Well, the mandate comes from two Security Council resolutions from 1993. It's a long time ago. And from Article 5 of the interim agreement. Article 5, which I helped write with Secretary Vance, and a long time ago now, says, you know, the interim agreement, we solved many of the problems, issues between the two countries, but we didn't solve the name issue and itself. And Article 5 says that with respect to this issue, under the Secretary General of the United Nations aegis and responsibility, the parties will continue in good faith to talk about this issue. So this is the mandate. I'm a personal representative of the Secretary General. The new Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, has reappointed me, and to be helpful to the parties in seeing whether the name issue can be solved. The basic issue is in the United Nations, there was a temporary designation. It's not even a name, it's a designation. It's like, you know, if you have a child, a baby, in the hospital, and before you give the child a name, so they say, you know, son of Metјu and Нимиц, you know. This is not the name of the child, this is just the designation of this little baby until the name is actually done. But everyone expected the name to be solved within a matter of months, not years. So.
But in the past, we witnessed that in some of your package proposals, as you like to call them, beside the name, there were also provisions on the language and on the identity identity, on the
nationality of the name,
of the.
So first, I want to make it clear that these discussions and the mandate has nothing to do with the identity of people. You know, people have their identity, and you can't negotiate your identity. That's part of your soul, right? So we don't negotiate people's identity. But in the United Nations system, there are designations for the language of the country and the name of the nationality. So it says, you know, United States of America, capital city Washington D.C., nationality American. That's what we use. And in France it says France. Then it says capital city Paris, and nationality French. So this is just a technical part of the United Nations system where you can look up what the name is. In most cases, this is not controversial at all. You know, for Greece, it's Hellenic Republic or Greece. They have two names in different contexts, and the capital city is Athens, and the nationality is Greek. You know, this is, but in your country, there's a little more openness to resolving these issues. So this was something that needs to be solved within the UN system.
Following, is the identity of the ethnic Macedonians subject to these negotiations?
No, any ethnic group, the United Nations doesn't deal with ethnic groups and doesn't deal with questions of what ethnic groups call themselves. It deals with states, so sovereign states, and the nationality of a sovereign state.
How do you see Greek claims of irredentism by Macedonian side?
I think that you know, when this whole issue came up and your country became independent, there was a lot of concern in Greece about the role your country would play, and how it would fit into the Balkan context. You know, the history of the region has been a really difficult history. If you go back to the Ottoman times, and most people in your country are very young, and that's ancient history, but it's not that ancient. And with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the region, the wars, the Balkan Wars, 1912, 1913, the division in the area, then World War I, and then the interwar period, then World War II, then the communist system and the Greek Civil War, which had its ramifications in this region, as you know, with things in the the Comintern, some language about aspirations in the region. So a lot of suspicion about what the future might hold. And the Greek government at the time felt strongly about this, brought this to the United Nations, and the Security Council agreed that there was a security concern. Otherwise, it would not have passed those resolutions. Now, historians can argue a long time about what this all meant, and whether there was any, the amount of credence you give to some of the concerns. But I think we have to look at this from a practical point of view. There was concern. It was the Greek government was a very responsible government, and brought it to the United Nations, and the Security Council agreed that this was something that had to be put on the agenda. So I think now time has passed. I think the two countries have lived peaceably together now for more than 25 years. There's a new generation looking at the issue. There are other concerns of the region that weren't there in the 90s. So it may be that the concerns of that period have to be looked at again. But I will say that this issue of Macedonia as a concept still is viewed very differently in the two countries. When I sit in Skopje with my friends there and talk about the history of the region and the culture of the region and what does Macedonia mean to them, and then I go to Athens or I go to Thessaloniki and talk to people there about the region and about Macedonia and Macedonian history and the great heroes of that ancient period and the interwar and the period for thousands of years between. Views of history are very different. Views of aspirations are different, and there are fears, there are concerns all around in every country of the region, and this is a reality. So, what's the job of diplomats? The job of diplomats: we don't solve historical problems. We don't solve problems of Alexander the Great. But what we try to solve is present issues between countries and try to take out the distortions and reach accommodations. And I think we can do that.
Do you see that there is an intensified interest among Western countries' governments concerning the name issue? And have you talked about this long-standing dispute with the new UN the Secretary General?
Yeah. So I've met the Secretary General, and I was impressed with how much he knew about this issue. And in reappointing me and working through his office, I know he's very, very interested in solving this problem. And he knows it personally as former Foreign Minister of Portugal, and so it's a concern, and he has a mandate to do this. So he cares a lot about it. And there's always been interest in this issue, because it's not just an abstract issue. It opens the door to solving a regional issue, and also bringing your country into the European Union, the European world, NATO, and I think solving a problem between two neighbors in a very sensitive region. So there's also renewed attention to the whole Balkan, Southeast Europe world. Other issues have come up in the fore there. Some issues of instability, issues of economic uncertainty, of outside powers, the whole migrant issue, that this region became a corridor for the migrants, which wasn't a big issue back 20-odd years ago. So we have some new issues in the region, and I know, having talked to some of the friendly governments, European governments, that there's renewed interest in this.
After so many years of efforts to solve the issue, do you feel disappointment? Do you still feel motivated? Do you still have energy to continue to fulfill the role of
That's
mediator?
a good question. That's what my family and my friends say to me. Why are you still doing this this project? I care a lot about it. I do. Every year, my appointment is not a permanent appointment. It's renewed every year, and I say to both parties, both in Skopje and in Athens, if you want me to stop and disappear, I'm happy to disappear, because I have other things that I like to do also. So I'm very motivated. And why am I motivated? I care a lot about your country. You know, I remember when it became independent, I had long talks with President Gligorov about how a new young country formulates itself, makes a place in the world. And many years ago, I was in the State Department, you know, in the United States government. I dealt with the region. Then I dealt with Yugoslavia. I dealt with the communist countries. I dealt with Greece and Turkey. I dealt with Cyprus. And I know that this region has so much potential, but it also has so much danger, that little things happen. Look at Yugoslavia. Those of us who worked on Yugoslavia in the old days, we thought there were many problems. We never thought it would break up and so many people would get killed. Fortunately, not in former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. It's the only area of Yugoslavia which got its independence without anyone being, you know, injured or killed. But the destruction of that will take generations, you know, to overcome some of the issues in that region. And we still have the issues of Bosnia-Herzegovina. We still have issues in Kosovo. You know, many, many issues. So I think that working on these problems, I'll say another thing. Do you see, do I have, yeah, I still have energy. If I didn't have energy, I would give it up. But I think that maintaining a process, United Nations process, is itself a good thing, even when you don't quite get to the solution. And let me say what I mean is that we have not, over the past 20 years, been able to reach a solution to the name issue between the two countries. This is true. On the other hand, we have a method of dealing back and forth, of conversing about it, of having diplomats talk about it, of having things put on the table. People go back and forth across the border. There's investment back and forth. There's trade back and forth. People from your country go down to Greece without feeling inhibited. Greeks feel comfortable coming up to your country. Sure, if the name issue was solved, it would be easier. But you have a very different thing. There are many places in the world where there's no process going on. Think of Syria. Think of some of the other terrible things that are going on in the world where the process has broken down. So here we have a process, we have a communication, we have a UN mandate, and we understand the parameters of the issue, and it won't get solved unless there are people in Athens and people in Skopje who are ready to be creative and constructive and work out something here with help from others, other friendly countries. But I think the process is important. If I can play a little role in maintaining the process, that's good. If I can't, then maybe someone else will.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you.